नमस्कार। बहुत बहुत प्रेम के साथ आप सभी का आज के इस वेबिनार में जो ट्यूसडे गैदरिंग्स के तत्वावधान में हो रहा है, स्वागत है। So a very very hearty welcome to all of you, and I will begin with the opening mantra. सद्गुरुनाथ महाराज की जय। आत्मा त्वं गिरिजामतिः सहचराः प्राणा शरीरं गृहम् पूजाते विषयोपभोगरचना निद्रा समाधिस्थितिः संचारः पदयो प्रदक्षिणविधि स्तोत्राणि सर्वा गिरो यद्यत् कर्म करोमि तत्तदखिलम् शम्भो तवाराधनम्। करचरणकृतं वाक् कायजं कर्मजं वा श्रवणनयनजं वा मानसं वापराधं विहितमविहितं वा सर्वमेतत् क्षमस्व। जय जय करुणाब्धे श्री महादेव शंभो। जय जय करुणाब्धे श्री महादेव शंभो। सद्गुरुनाथ महाराज की जय। Once again, a very warm welcome to everyone, and we are here for a very special session from Rajan Bhai, who is already with us. And last time we heard about this great illuminating talk about the science of the word, and today it is about the word or the bunch of words that are going to prove most beneficial or that have proved most beneficial for everybody. And so without much ado, I welcome Rajan Bhai to take the session. So a very warm welcome, Rajan Bhai.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Good afternoon. Today we are going to talk about the Gayatri Mantra. Now, before we go into the mantra, it would be nice to go into the story behind the Gayatri Mantra and to try to understand what that story conveys to us. What does it symbolize? So the story is that there was an emperor of Kanauj. His name was Gadi, and he was also called as Kaushik. So on one of his exploits with his army, he took shelter in the ashram of sage Vashisht, who we all know was the guru of Sri Ram. And he was wondering how Vashisht would feed his army. And so the sage told him that I have a divine cow given to me as a present by Indra, and the cow will fulfill all your needs. And so the cow, invoked tables of food and whatever they needed. The army was satiated, and the emperor suddenly this desire to possess this cow came into the emperor. And he told the sage that this cow should belong to the emperor. It cannot belong to you. And you please give me this cow. The sage refused to part with the cow. So the emperor asked his army to attack the hermitage. Of course, the sage had divine power, so he destroyed Kaushik's army. And Kaushik went back to his kingdom very depressed and sullen. And he said that what is the point in being a king if a sage can have so many powers? And so he gave up his kingdom and he went to meditate in the forest. And as he grew in his meditation, he had this one idea of taking revenge on Vashisht. And so in the stories that go, he attacked Vashisht many times, could not defeat him, but he was able to kill all of his children. Then he did tapa, and Brahma came to him, and he thought Brahma would confer upon him the title of a Brahma Rishi, which Vashisht had. And but Brahma did not confer on him the title of a Brahma Rishi, it was Raja Rishi. And this then provoked that pattern of revenge so much in him that he decided to go and kill Vashisht. Now, when he took sannyas and went into the forest, he changed his name from Kaushik to Vishwamitra. So he was known as the sage Vishwamitra, the Rajrishi Vishwamitra. So Vishwamitra then decides to kill Vashisht. And it is one full moon night that he takes a knife and he goes to Vashisht's home to kill him. Vashisht and his wife Arundhati are sitting on the terrace and admiring the beauty of the moon. And he's standing behind the wall and he's listening to them speak. And Arundhati tells Vashisht that nothing can compare with the effulgence, the brightness, the beauty of the moon. And Vashisht says, no, the sadhana, the tapas, the austerities which Vishwamitra is performing go much beyond the effulgence of the moon. Now he's listening to this behind the wall, and it suddenly pierces him like an arrow. And that inner pattern of revenge, that sanskar of revenge, which had been renewed and renewed through so many attempts, it dissolved in that moment of understanding. And he falls at Vashisht's feet, and Vashisht puts his hands on him, lifts him up and says, you are now a Brahma Rishi. And he says, rise, Brahma Rishi. And at that moment, from Vishwamitra's mouth, these words came out, Tat Savitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Naha Prachodaya. And that became the Gayatri mantra because it is in the Gayatri Chand. Now, two of Vishwamitra's disciples, their names were Gargi and Bharadwaj, they added the first line, Om Bhu Bhuva Swaha, which is incidentally not in the Gayatri Chanda. And even the Tat Savitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimai Dhiyo Yo Naha Prachodaya, there they found that one half syllable was missing. So they added that half syllable to increase the power of the mantra, to make it a 24 matruka mantra. Otherwise, it was a 23 and a half matruka mantra. And instead of the Bhargo, they Tat Savitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhyo Yonah Prachodayat. The Varenium, the word Varenium, instead of Varenium, they made it Varenium. So they added half a matruka over there. And so that became a full 24, matruka mantra in the Gayatri Chanda. And the first line which they added, Om Bhu Bhuva Swaha, it is called as Vyaruti. And they added it for a purpose, so people could understand what was the boundary of this mantra, what this mantra was pertaining to. So this is the story behind the Gayatri mantra. And it's very important because one of our basic attitudes is I am better than you. And if somehow you are better than me, if Vasishtha is better than Vishwamitra, then this idea of showing to you, this pattern of showing to you, I become identified with that pattern, I become a victim of that pattern. So when we go into the story, we see that we must work with the pattern within us of giving it back to someone. You hurt me, you insult me, there is a pattern inside. I want to give it back to you. If you say that somebody is better than you, then somewhere there is a pattern inside that I want to be better than him. And this is one of our deeply embedded attitudes. This attitude is formed very, very early in childhood, and it takes years and years of observing the working of this attitude to be free of this attitude. It took Vishwamitra so many years. Right? So, as long as we hold this attitude within us to take revenge on someone, to give it back to someone, then we have not yet come to that level of purity to work with the Gayatri Mantra. I'm not saying that we have to be completely free of that, because that, that sanskar has been with us for thousands of years. But it must be in the light of our observation. It must be in the light of our consciousness. That here is an attitude deeply embedded, and it's going to take me time. And I don't want to ever become a victim of this attitude. And it is in the dissolving of that attitude that the Gayatri Mantra was, discovered by the Rishi Vishwamitra. So that story is very important. It does give us an idea. I just take a small quotation over here. Jesus says, make friends with your adversary on the way, lest your adversary send you to the officer, and the officer send you to the judge, and the judge put you in a prison from which you will not escape till you have paid your last farthing. This is one of the most beautiful lines of Jesus. And Christians say, of course, that they don't believe in karma. Now, just look at this. What is Jesus saying? That I make friends with your adversary, with your enemy. Now, you have insulted me. However, whatever I show outside my love for you, I have this enmity for you inside. Right? And this thought of my taking revenge on you, this thought of my showing you keeps on repeating here in this chattering of this monkey up here. I may be making a sandwich, or I may be having a cold drink, or I may be watching the match on TV, and suddenly again I think of you. Again that pattern renews itself. Again inside my monkey starts chattering, I want to get revenge. So Jesus is saying, don't hold on to that pattern of revenge. The more we hold on to the pattern of revenge, then your adversary will send you to the officer. Now he's talking of karma over here. The adversary will send you to the officer. The officer will send you to the judge. The judge will put you in jail till you have not, and you will not escape till you have paid your last farthing. I mean, he's saying by just holding on to that thought that I want to take revenge on you, that I want to be better than you, just holding on to that thought, I'm inviting so much pain and suffering in my life. I'm sowing a wrong seed. I hope I'm coming across with this. And that is why we must understand the story behind the Gayatri Mantra, because it is that story which tells us the level of purity which goes with the Gayatri Mantra. Now, we'll go today into the meaning of the Gayatri Mantra, and we'll not just the meaning as how we say the Gayatri Mantra, but can we live a life of the Gayatri Mantra? Can we not just recite it in the morning, but do we live it in our everyday living, in the small acts that we perform of life every day? Gayatri. This first word is very, very deep. And Gaya means to sing. And still my teacher, Mr. Tavaria, used to say, you can't sing that mantra. Right? It has to be said in a certain way. So Gaya means to sing. So here maybe that by saying this mantra, we are saying the song of life, the very song of life. Ga, Gati, Ya, Yama. Gati means to move forward. Ya means to pause, to stop the Gati. To rise on the ladder of consciousness, we use the Gati to rise, to move forward, and we stop that which pulls us down. This is in a way, it means the same thing as Abhyas and Vairagya. We do Vairagya of that which pulls us down, and we do Abhyas of that which takes us up. So, Ga, Gati, Ya, to pause, to stop. One of the most basic things which Mr. Tavaria used to teach was the pause, how to pause. Because unless we pause and create a gap, we keep leading a mechanical life and don't allow consciousness to come in. But when we pause our mechanicalness, we create a gap where we allow consciousness to enter. So, Ga, Ya, and 3 means the third, to go beyond the third. We can take this in another way. Ga means Ganga, Ya means Yamuna, and 3 means the third. Ganga is Gyan, Yamuna is Bhakti, and when Gyan and Bhakti merge into one another, you can't do Bhakti without right knowledge of how to do Bhakti, and without Bhakti, Gyan becomes dry. So when each one merges into each other, the third comes, which is beyond Gyan and Bhakti, and that is the understanding, the real understanding, not intellectual understanding. This is a different kind of understanding. So Ganga, Yamuna, 3, the third, Saraswati, right? So Ga can also mean an afferent impulse. Ya can also mean an efferent impulse. The afferent comes from out in. The efferent comes from in to out. You insult me, it comes in as an afferent impulse. I speak all kinds of words about you, it goes out as an efferent impulse. And this is the story of my life, action and reaction. So now it is saying, can I create something more out of this? The third. You insult me, I see the anger rising and I pause the anger, yum. I pause the anger, yum. I observe the anger. And in that light of observation, in the light of consciousness, that which is darkness in the presence of light, and anger is darkness, it vanishes. And I'm free of that pattern of anger. I'm free of the bondage of anger. And in that, there is a small moment of moksha inside. So, and I create a new impulse. You came in as an insult, ga, right? I was reacting all the time, yeah, but now I've created something which is beyond that, a new impulse, the third. And this is, and we can go on like this, the meaning, so many things come out of this word Gayatri, we can keep on finding different connotations, but it's a very, very rich mantra, very, very rich mantra. Now, the first word is Om. I'm not going to go into the depth of Om today. If possible, we will take a separate talk only on Om and how to, we will break it up in its different parts, how to say each part, what is the use of each part. So I'm not going to go into the mantra Om today. But what I would like to say, this Om signifies something. And when we understand the meaning of the mantra, we must understand the significance of Om. Science says that there was a big bang and everything was created. But in science, there is a time lapse between the big bang and the total creation of everything. Shastras say creation happened in an instant. There was no time. It just happened. And it is like you throw a ball of water, a stone in a water, or a ball in a bucket of water, and that ball is Om, and it forms 7 levels in the water simultaneously. It doesn't form one level after the other. And these 7 levels are Bhu Bhuva Swaha Maha Jana Tapa Satya. So when when Vishwamitra's disciples added this first line, Om Bhu Bhuva Swaha, they added the mantra Om at the beginning of the mantra. They are telling us something, that for normal purpose, we are making a boundary of this mantra, which is Bhu Bhuva Swaha. But this mantra is not just concerned with Bhu Bhuva Swaha. Because they put Omkar in the beginning, they are saying it is Bhu Bhuva Swaha Mahajana Tapa Satya. All the 7 levels of existence. Bhu being the physical or the cellular universe. Bhuva being the emotional or the astral or the molecular universe. Swaha being the electronic or the power of mental, I won't say thought, but the power of mental universe. Maha, Bhu Bhuva Swaha, is surrounded by a Lakshman Rekha. You can't go out. And that is the Lakshman Rekha of memory. All memory never dies. It is in something called Mahakal. And when you pierce Mahakal, you enter into the universe of the Atma. The Atma has 3 universes: Jana, that is where of the Atma, divine fragment; Tapa, of divine wholeness, Paramatma; and Satyam, of wholeness, absolute, which is unmanifest completely. So these are the 7 levels of existence. And my teacher, Mr. Tavaria, wrote about these levels in his book, The Purpose of Birth and Death. So the rishis are saying that when you start the mantra, you're concerned with Bhu Bhuva Swaha, but the time comes when you have to pierce through Mahakal and go through Jana Tapa Satya. Right? So there are two parts to this mantra, and we'll go into those two parts. So, Om Bhu Bhuva Swaha. These are called as Vyarutis. Vyaruti means, the normal meaning is divine words, or what do you call auspicious words. I'll just give you the Gujarati meaning first, because Sanskrit is easier to translate in Gujarati. Vyapak rite pathrayalu. That which is spread all over. Vyapak means properly. Pathrayalu means spread all over. What is spread all over? What is spread all over? Our attention. Our attention. I see a beautiful thing in a shop. My attention is seduced by that. It is automatically attracted by that. When I come home, that keeps on twisting in my mind. So a part of my attention is stuck with that. So the Rishi is saying, where all is your attention stuck? Where all have you invested attention? Just as we invest money, right? Where all have you invested attention? Now he's saying you have invested attention in three places: Bhu, Bhuva, Swaha. And he's saying that you want to go on this journey of Bhu, Bhuva, Swaha, Mahajana, Tapa, Satyam. But the only currency you have is the currency of attention. The only money you can pay with is the money of attention. And your attention is squandered everywhere. And he's saying, first look in the Bhulok. Where is your attention in the Bhulok? Bhulok is the material universe. So maybe I have a car. And nothing happens to the car, but some children come from school and they are going home and they take a stone and they make a line on my new car, right? Nothing happens to the car, but definitely on my heart, a new line is made. So my attention is stuck in the car, right? If anything happens to the car, I get heartburn. In Gujarati, we say, jeev bade. I don't know what we say in Hindi, but in Gujarati, we say something happens to a car, jeev bade. That is, where all am I attached in the physical universe? I'm attached with my car. If something happens to my car, then it happens to me. If something happens to my house, it happens to me. If something happens with my bank balance, it happens to me. And there could be so many things. If something happens to my favorite cup, it happens to me. And the Rishi is saying, all this attention you've invested everywhere, you want to go on this journey, take it back. And here people make a mistake. They say that, okay, if the house is the cause of my attention being stuck with the house, then leave the house. But that doesn't work. You can't leave the house. You have to live in the house and detach from the house. Bring your attention back, because you need this attention to pay for your ticket of this journey of Gayatri. So the Rishi is saying, these are the Vyarutis. In this physical universe, in this material universe, your attention is stuck in so many places. Please bring it back. It is like, some people are very rich, but they are not very rich because they've given their money to so many places all over and they have nothing for themselves. So on paper, they are very rich, but they're not rich because they have to take back their money if they want their money back. Similarly, we've given our attention to all kinds of places. So he's saying in the first place you've given it is in the Bhu universe. Then he's saying you have given it in the Bhuva universe, in the universe of relationship. And I'll say, yeah, in the universe of relationship. And I'll have a wife, and some of my attention is what do you call attached to my wife. Does my wife listen to me? If she doesn't listen to me, I get heartburn, right? And etc. If my son doesn't listen to me, my friends, if my friend doesn't come to my house for dinner, but goes to your house for dinner, again, I get heartburn, right? And so my attention in the world of relationships, in the Bhuva Loka, it is what you call fragmented in so many places. My friends, my family, my this. Incidentally, there's nothing like my friend. There is friendship. There is friendliness. The minute it becomes my, it becomes ugly. Right? So we separate from this. We separate from this. That is, we doesn't mean we stop enjoying having a lunch or dinner with our friends. Definitely enjoy a lunch or dinner with the friends, but bring the attention back. If they don't invite you for dinner, don't get heartburn, don't get upset. You're detached from that. So we detach from all our relationships. Detachment does not mean leaving them. Detachment does not mean not loving them. We love them more because we are detached from them. Right? One of the beautiful lines which Krishna tells Arjun, he says that all these people who have gathered here, they've come to please Duryodhana. I won't do anything to please you. I will do what is right for you. Right? Similarly, when we detach from our children, we do what is right for them. When we detach from our friends, we do what is right for them. But if we are attached to them, we do what only that to please them. So if the Rishi is saying you want to go in this journey, Bhu, Bhuva, Swaha. And Swaha, for the time being, we will take as the world of thought. I have a thought that I am an Indian. It is just a thought. God did not create any country. But I have a thought that I am an Indian. And I'm very attached to this thought, because when I have a joke, you know, that the American did this and the Russian did this and the Indian did this, the Indian always comes out on top. Right? So I'm very, very attached to this thought that I'm an Indian. And then I'm attached to this thought that I'm a Hindu. Maybe I'm attached to some thought that I am of this caste. Maybe I'm attached to a thought that I have a degree. Maybe I'm attached to the thought that I'm a good professional, etc., etc. And the Rishi is saying, get your attention back. Take your attention back. So he's saying, Om Bhu Bhuvasva, these Vyarutis, where everything is Vyapakrite Patrayalu, spread out your attention, take it back. That attention is what you need to go on your journey. That attention is the ray, the laser beam which you send inside to search for your own self. Om Bhu Bhuvasvaha Tat Savitu Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yonaha Prachodaya. Now, here he's giving us also a boundary. He's telling us this mantra is concerned with Bhu Bhuva Swaha. It is not concerned with anything else. It is concerned with Bhu Bhuva Swaha, and this is what we are going to talk about. Now, any mantra, if it is a spiritual mantra, the words have to be arranged in a way in which the vibrations move from gross to subtle. The words cannot be arranged in the way of the meaning of the mantra, because the mantra is phonetic, the mantra is tonal. So the words must be arranged in a way that each stanza of the mantra takes you from gross to subtle. It takes you from lower to the higher. So when we look at this mantra, Bhu Swaha, it is taking us from gross vibration to what do you call subtle vibration. Tat Varenyam Vargaha Dhimahi. Dhyo prachodaya. So each line of the mantra is a movement from gross to subtle. And this is the arrangement of the tonal, the words in the mantra, so that when you repeat the mantra, you're creating finer and finer vibrations. You're moving into outer space, or you're going into more finer vibrations. You're not falling back into the gross. But supposing I wanted to make a mantra to earn money, not to walk on the spiritual path, then I would have that mantra move from subtle to gross. I don't know if I'm coming across in this. I'll tell you a small story. The Omkar which I teach was taught to me by Mr. Tavaria. Mr. Tavaria used to teach a very specific Omkar. And I've been teaching for more than 20 years now. And people who have been with me from the beginning, I found that because of the Omkar, they were going into financial difficulties. And I realized that the Omkar which Mr. Tavaria taught was an Omkar of dissolution. You go from the lower and you move and you are gone. That's the end of everything. So it will move from the lower. So then I said that this is not right. I mean, we have to live in a world of balance. So I taught them that if you're facing financial difficulty, bring the Omkar back. Come back to the physical, right? So, and this changed many things for them. What I'm trying to say is that the Gayatri Mantra has nothing to do with bringing money into my home. It has nothing to do with giving me a new car, right? It has only got one purpose: to take me from the gross to the subtle, take me from the lower to the higher, take me from man to the divine. It has only one purpose. It has no other purpose, right? It is not going to, if some ghost attacks my house or if something, it's not going to save me from the ghost, right? Right? It may lead me to a state where I can observe the ghost as something else. So we must be very clear why we are saying this mantra. What is the aim in our minds? What is our lakshya? The lakshya can only be one: to move on the steps of consciousness, on the ladder of consciousness, from the cellular, from the physical, to the astral, to the mental, bypass memory, go into the world of the divine. This should be our motto. So when a mantra is put together, it is put together in the way we say it, in the tonal meaning, in the phonetic meaning. The real meaning of the mantra is totally different. So we just write down the meaning of the mantra. Om Bhu Bhuva Swaha Savita Devasya Varenyam Tat Bhargaha Dhimah Yaha Naha Dhiyo Prachodaya. This is the meaning of the Gayatri Mantra. Okay, now let us try to go into this. Om Bhu Bhuva Swaha. In this region of Bhu Bhuva Swaha, in this physical universe, in this astral universe or universe of relationship, of emotions, in this mental universe, Savita Devasya Varenyam. This Savita Dev, the one you see shining in front of you, Dev means to shine. Savita means the creative energy. Savitru, the creative energy, right? This creative energy which is shining in front of you, Varenyam, Varva Yogya. Var means to choose. To choose. Choosing. Like we have the old word called Swayamvar, where Draupadi went and chose a husband. So it comes from this var, to choose, right? Varenyam. So in these three worlds that we live in, the physical world, the astral world, the mental world, only one thing is worth choosing, that Dev which is shining, that creative energy which is shining in front of you. Savita Devasya Varenyam. But the mantra does not say that we are meditating on Savita Dev. We are not, it does not say that we are meditating on that. It says that we are meditating on its bhargaha, on its effulgence. I'll again go to this. It's very, very interesting over here. There's so many mysteries hidden. What are you? Huh? Should I put it?
Yeah.
Okay. So he's saying that in these three worlds, that which is worth choosing, that which is worth worshipping, is this Savita Dev which is shining in front of us. But he's not saying we meditate upon him. He's saying Tat Bhargaha Dhimahi. We meditate on his effulgence. We meditate upon the light of its light. Effulgence is not its light, because he's already used the word Devasya, Dev, that he is shining, right? He has already used the word light. He's saying we meditate on the light of his light. This is very, very deep over here. And here certain things happen in this mantra, which we must also realize. I hope everyone is with me. The first thing is that the mantra is to Gayatri. Gayatri as the mother, Gayatri as the goddess, whatever. But the energy talked about, the creative energy talked about, Savita is Dev, it is masculine. Okay, I don't know if I'm coming across it. The connotation on the top of the mantra is Gayatri mother. But the energy which we are talking about is not Savita Devi, it is Savita Deva, masculine. And it's so mysterious, this mantra, when we go into it. Right? Now he's saying that in these three worlds, this Savita Dev, this sun shining in front of you, is worth worshipping, it is worth choosing. Right? Actually, he's saying it's the only thing worth choosing. Of course, we may choose so many things in our life. But he's saying the only thing worth choosing in these three worlds is this Savita Dev. But he's saying we don't meditate upon him. Tat Bhargaha Dhimahi. We meditate upon his Bhargaha, the light of his light, his effulgence. We'll go into this. Now again here the mantra takes a turn. Om Bhubhuva Swaha. In the bathroom. Savita Devasya Varenyam. Tat Bhargaha. Till then the mantra is singular. The minute he uses the word Dhima, he is not saying I am meditating upon, we are meditating upon. So again, let's now go into this. Sing Om Bhubhuva Swaha. Savita Devasya Varenyam. Tat Bhargaha Dhimai, we are meditating upon. Suddenly from singular, it has gone into plural. And when you read all the commentaries, they say it means that Lok Kalyan ka mantra, it is talking about everybody. It cannot, the Rishi is not bothered about that. He's talking about something very definite over here. So he's saying, Tat Bhargaha Dhimai, Yaha Naha Dhiyo Prachodayat. That Bhargaha which we have meditated upon, Yaha, that Bhargaha which we have meditated upon, Naha, Hamari, us. He's again using plural over here, not singular. Hum sabka, us. Naha Dhiyo Buddhi, our Buddhi Prachodaya, in a prerna ape, it awakens our Buddhi. It, what do you call instigates our Buddhi. It excites our Buddhi. Now let's again go into this. Om Bhuv Bhuvasvaha Savita Devasya Varenyam Tat Bhargaha Dhimahi. We meditate on its Bhargaha. Let that Bhargaha, Yahanaha, our, allow our Buddhi to unfold. Dhiyo Buddhi, unfold. Not instigate, unfold would be the better word, I would say. Right? To awaken would be the better word. Awaken our Buddhi inside. Now, this is the first part of the mantra where he has given us a boundary of Bhubhuva Swaha. Right? Then he takes us a little deeper. Now we'll again go into this. Now these words, Savita Devasya Varenyam, they can have two meanings. One is that I choose, I worship this Savita Dev in front of me, this what you call creative energy which is shining in front of me. That could be the first meaning. But again, you see in Sanskrit, the fourth, fifth, and sixth, they come out the same. So when we say this, it could also mean I worship Savita. I'll just come into this. Some time ago, there was a serial called Devo Ka Dev Mahadev. I don't know if any of you heard of the serial, right? There was a serial called, so he's saying Dev, there is a God, but there is a God of the God called Mahadev, right? So there is a Dev, God, and there is a God of the God called Mahadev. The Rishi is saying something very similar over here. He's saying Om Bhu Bhuva Swaha Savita Devasya Varenyam. Savita Dev is worth choosing. But these words could also mean Savita Ka Dev is also worth choosing. The Dev of Savita is also worth choosing. I don't know, am I coming across in this? Right? So there are two meanings over here. So in the first, he gives us a boundary of Bhubhuva Swaha, and in Bhubhuva Swaha, of course, this electronic God in front of me, the sun is shining there, Savita Dev, but then the Rishi is saying, that sun also has a God, that sun also has a Dev, and that is your inner Atma, he is saying, and that is worth choosing. So this whole Gayatri mantra, it falls into two particular sadhanas, in one we move from where we are to the sun, and in the other from the sun to the divine. It is in two different things, and both these are hidden in these few words which come in front of us. Now let us go back to Om Bhubhuva Swaha Tat Savita Devasya Varenyam Tat Bhargaha Dhimahi. So here now thing is, what does he mean by we are meditating upon? And what does he mean by effulgence of the light? What does he mean by light of the light? The rays of the sun god, they fall on the earth and they give rise to the vegetable kingdom. The vegetable kingdom gives rise to the animal kingdom. The animal kingdom is the humanity. humanity subsists on the vegetable kingdom. Right? It uses the vegetable kingdom to nourish itself. Now, what else does the sun do? The sun creates the atmosphere. So the breath which I breathe, the oxygen which I breathe, comes from the sun. And the third thing, I look at you, I can look at you because of the sun. And there's a whole, you come in as tanmatras, you come in as prana. It is the prana of the sun, the electronic universe flowing through my five senses each moment. And my guru used to say 30,000 of these impulses flow in every second. So we are related to the sun in three different ways. We eat from the sun, physical eating, air eating, we breathe from the sun, and each moment we take in impressions from the sun. Now, someone may say that impression is a food or not a food. Impression is pure prana. It comes in through the five senses. It is the transformation of impression which takes us up on the spiritual path. The whole aim of spirituality is to transform impression. I'll give you one small example. Supposing somebody's girlfriend runs away and the poor guy is in depression and we don't know what to do. So we take him to the doctor and he's in depression. He can't get up from the bed. And the doctor gives him the best, drips and nourishments and everything. But nothing happens to that guy. Nothing. He just is still going further and further into depression. And then a telegram comes from his girlfriend. I'm coming back. Right? No need of any drips. No need of any vitamins from the doctor. He'll jump up out of bed. Right? He'll be okay. This is an impression. What came in as an impression. And you see, words can lead you to depression. Words can lead you to greater height. It is each moment we are taking, the eyes are taking in impressions, the ears are taking in impressions. Impression is a kind of food, and Gurdjieff calls these as three kinds of food. Now, when we take in these foods, do we create effulgence out of them? Do we meditate upon them in such a way that that sun has given us light, but we have transformed that light into effulgence? You know, once a friend of mine, he had a heart attack. So I went to meet him, and he was, after the angioplasty, he was having his evening meal. And he was having his evening meal, and one spoon went in the mouth, the second spoon is ready over here. This is why you had a heart attack. One spoon goes in the mouth, put your spoon down, wait till that goes down the throat, then take the second. Don't break the chapati before that first chapati has gone down. How do you eat your food? How do we eat our food? See, you don't have to eat your food in silence. Don't have to eat your food in silence. Don't be very serious about it. Food is there so that friends can get together and enjoy life. You enjoy the food, Bhulok, you enjoy the company, Bhuvalok, you enjoy the conversations, Swahalok. It's a celebration of life, food. But when something is in my mouth, I can wait till I've got it down and then talk to you. I can create a small, law, that as long as I'm chewing something, I'm not going to talk to you. So that very chewing it in a particular way, looking at it with a certain kind of consciousness, changes the food. It is not just food which goes in. I extract consciousness from the food. I can have another rule that, when I'm eating, I keep my feet on the ground. So I'll feel my feet on the ground, and this will give me a little detachment from the food. I'll still enjoy the food, but there'll be a little detachment from the food. When I'm swallowing one morsel, I won't break the second morsel. I'll wait. And in that gap, I will pause. I will stop my thinking. So, and definitely I won't, eat in front of the TV when one person is in a serial murdering another person, right? But so I can eat my food in a way, tat bhargah dhimahi, that bhargah, the sun has come into my mouth through the food. I'm meditating it on that sun in such a way that I extract its effulgence. Am I coming across this? I don't know. Now, can I breathe in a way? Can I breathe in a way that I extract effulgence? I'm going to make a small chart over here. How much time do we have? I'm going to make a small chart over here. When we eat food, yeah, you go ahead. Food, the first thing which our, what do you call, bodies extract from the food is magnetism. I'll go into this, the properties of each of these in some other talk, is magnetism. So this magnetism, from the stomach, the food goes into the blood, we extract magnetism. The food then goes further into what we, and it goes from the liver up into the brain. And the first thing we extract from that is motor electricity. All our thoughts are created by this motor electricity. The second extraction in the brain is reflex electricity. All our emotions come out of reflex electricity. And then the food comes right down, and the final product out of the food is sex energy. Okay. Now, when a normal man breathes, the breath goes, it meets the blood. The first thing which is extracted from the blood is from the breath is magnetism. Yeah? Is magnetism. Yeah. But the magnetism which is extracted from the breath is of a more subtle, more refined quality than the magnetism extracted from food. Then the blood goes into the brain, and from the breathing, the breath which we have taken in, the brain extracts motor electricity. This gives us finer thoughts than the food which we eat. So it extracts motor electricity. For normal man, the breath does not go further. Nothing else is extracted. Right? Normal man, he is born, he dies, his breathing stops at motor electricity. Now, if we learn a way to breathe, and one of that is why we taught you 3-step rhythmic breathing, then we cross this gap between motor electricity and reflex electricity, and the breath goes further and extracts reflex electricity. This is very interesting. Then the breath goes, this reflex electricity is much better. It gives us higher and finer emotions. The breath goes down and it extracts sex energy. Sex energy, which is extracted from food, becomes a victim of excitement. Sex energy, which is extracted from breath, cannot be victimized by excitement. It cannot be excited. It's a different kind of sex energy. Now here there is something which is more, the breath goes one step further. The breath goes one step further, and one extra energy is extracted, and this is the energy of death. Can you see? It is the sex energy which brings something from an unseen dimension into a seen dimension. And the death energy destroys something in a seen dimension and sends it into an unseen dimension. These are two very powerful energies. Okay, come back. So how are we breathing? When we breathe, the breath which is coming in is actually Savita Devasya Varenyam. It is the Savita Dev which we are breathing in. But are we going to the final extraction, or is all of humanity stopping at motor electricity as I showed you? Then we are not extracting from that Savita Dev the finer products which lead us to a higher state of consciousness. And the final thing which comes in, the final food from the sun, is an impression. Now here we have to see one thing. All plants, all animals, they respond to external stimuli. It is a built-in mechanism to respond to external stimuli. Man has a choice to respond to external stimuli or to be self-consciousness first and then respond. If he responds to external stimuli without self-consciousness, then he is no different from an animal and a plant. He is living mechanical. Now try to see this in our daily relationship. You say that I went to see the Taj Mahal, right? Now that is an impression which has come in. Have I digested that impression? Have I sent that impression on a journey of digestion? No, I react immediately. I respond to external. But I went to see the Taj Mahal 3 years ago. Can you understand? Every impression which comes in, before we can send it down the throat, we vomit it outside. Or you will quote something from the newspaper. The government has decided to increase the gap between two vaccines, right? And you will quote from the newspaper. And before I even heard you, I'll say, yes, there is a scientific study which says this and that, etc., etc. I vomit it out. Spirituality means to take in and extract energy out of it, to extract consciousness out of it. And all impressions are neutral. You insulting me or you praising me makes no difference. When it is broken down into electromagnetic pieces which pass through those electromagnetic pieces are neither insult or praise. In the Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna that what is coming in is only tanmatra, matra sparshastu konteya, sukha dukha sitoshra, and titikshasva bharata. Learn the power of titiksha. Learn to endure them. Don't react to them. Don't vomit them outside. But in our lives, from morning to evening, every impression which comes in, we don't allow it to move on a path of digestion to extract something higher from it. And we keep on vomiting it outside. And some people, they have a habit of vomiting even before the impression comes in. And we have to learn over here to allow the impression to come in. That is why many times I tell people, just listen, don't bring in your knowledge, because if you bring in your knowledge, you won't take in the impression, you'll vomit something outside. So these are three kinds of food which Gurdjieff says we take in from the sun. The Rishi is saying you meditate on these three foods in such a way that they extract something called bharga, effulgence. Effulgence. This effulgence was called by Mr. Tavaria as the energy of essence of consciousness. It is that energy which creates the bridge to consciousness, which is the bridge to consciousness. And in that energy, it awakens our buddhi inside, it enlightens our buddhi inside. And that is the purpose of this mantra. So here we've completed the first part of the mantra. The first part of the mantra, Om Bhu Bhuva Swaha. So we've kept Om on the side. Bhu Bhuva Swaha. Savita Devasya Varenyam. Tat Bhargaha Dhimahi. We meditate. Now, why the word we? Why the word we? Why has it become plural over here? when we meditate upon something, supposing I'm taking in food, that food I must, what do you call, be conscious of that food with all four of my centers: the thinking center, the feeling center, the instinctive center, the moving center. I'm chewing the food with my moving center. I'm getting the taste of the food through my instinctive center. I'm understanding the power of the food through my intellectual center. And I'm creating a like and a likeness for that food through my emotional center. He's saying that tat bhargah dhimahi, when he uses dhimahi plural, he's not saying for all the people. He's saying do it with all four of your centers. When you're approaching the food, do it with all four of your centers. When you're approaching the air, do it with all four of your centers. Do it when you're approaching and you cannot digest impression without balance in all four centers. In our lives, the thinking center does the work of the emotional center does the work of the thinking center, right? Somebody tells me, this share is going to double tomorrow. My thinking center goes for a walk somewhere. My emotional center jumps onto it. And then tomorrow, instead of doubling, it goes half, right? So in our lives, these centers are not in balance. And when we want to work with life, when we want to work with the impressions in life, this meditation is all the four centers together. Dhimahi. So he's saying, in plural, he's saying because Dhimahi. And you give all the four centers the buddhi. You give all the four centers the buddhi to awaken their intelligence. Yaha naha dhiyo prachodaya. Someone will say, what is the intelligence of the instinctive center? I'll give you a small example. One guy, he goes for a party at night. And when he leaves the party, he's totally drunk. And he's walking on his way home. And he's drunk and he's walking this way, that way. And he comes to one passage where he's going home, which is totally dark. No one is around. And he hears footfalls about 15-20 feet away from him. And he looks back, it's dark, he can't see anyone, but he can hear these footfalls. Suddenly the instinctive center intelligence takes over. His whole being drunk vanishes away. Now he's totally alert. And he sees those footfalls, he's hearing those footfalls. One arrow of attention is on those footfalls, right? And then, of course, that person, whoever those footfalls were, he crosses the street and he heaves a sigh of relief. He's not behind me any longer. But he doesn't go back to being drunk. Now, this is a true story. This is a true story, right? So each of these centers have their own intelligence, which can be awakened. And it is the duty of man to awaken these intelligences. So he's saying yaha naha. Yaha means naha are, that effulgence, that bharga, it awakens the intelligence of us. That is these four centers inside. So that is why the mantra moves from singular to plural. Now we'll go a little bit into the second part of the mantra. And here he's given a beautiful this thing, because this nobody, I have yet to see someone teach this kind of sadhana. So he's saying, Om Bhu Bhuva Swaha, Savita Ka Dev, the Dev of Savita, Varenyam, Varva Yogya hai, is worth choosing. So now he's saying that that God, that Paramatma, that Atma, which created the sun, we must choose him, not the sun. Now he's gone beyond Bhu Bhuva Swa, because Swa is the sun. Now he's going beyond Bhu Bhuva Swa. He's saying in that Bhu Bhuva Maha Janatapa Satya. Now what is Mahakal? And how do we pierce Mahakal? It sounds very big. Oh, there is one physical universe, an astral universe, mental, surrounded by this big, what do you call, time, the Mahakal. Mahakal is nothing but memory. And we have to ask ourselves this simple question. In these 24 hours, which I lived, at present it's 5:41. So from 5:41 yesterday, have I been free from memory for even half a minute? So how am I going to pierce that? Like the rocket pierces the atmosphere of the Earth to move into outer space. And here outer space is freedom from memory. Freedom from memory. And if we start practicing now, we may reach a state after a few years. You say, I went to see the Taj Mahal. And immediately I say, I saw the Taj Mahal 6 months ago. From where have I spoken? Where have I spoken from? Memory. Memory. Now, if I'm a little conscious over here, I say, oh, pause. I don't want to speak from memory. Now I'm pausing the electric current, which is memory. I don't want to be your slave. And you see, Mr. Tavaria used to say, we wear only two chains. On one is memory and one is kamna, desire. Right? Memory. How do we break that chain of memory? Because we are living in one big bubble of memory. Everything is memory. This data flowing into these computers is nothing but memory. And we must put a timer in our watches, which will ring every few hours. And we go into a corner and just say, I want to be. The minute I become a father, I'm memory. The minute I become a son, I'm memory. The minute I become a husband or a wife, I'm memory. I just want to feel to be. And in that moment of being, there'll be at least a fraction of a second where memory will drop. And this is a practice which we must do. Because when we are free of bhu bhuva swa, we are going to come in front of memory. And if we have practiced from now, then we'll know what to do with that big memory. We have to practice with small memories. And supposing we are sitting in a conversation, talking with people, and suddenly I remember, oh, I also know something about what these guys are talking about. Let me add pause. I don't want to say it immediately. If I say it immediately, I'm a victim of memory. I'm a slave of memory. I'll say it after 5 minutes. I'll say it in a different way. I'll add something new to it, which is not from my memory. I'll try to say it in some different original way. In this, I will have to consciously work upon it. Over there, I'll bring consciousness into it. And in this way, as we practice slowly over a period of time in the day, there will be those small moments, those fraction of small moments where we may just have a glimpse. There's no memory. And in that falling of memory, it will be as if a baggage of thousands of years have fallen. And in that moment, you're free of all that baggage, And it's something worth practicing. What you can also do is maybe you can take out a week in a whole year, go away to some place where you're neither a father, nor the son, nor the husband, or whatever, no friend, nothing, where there are no personality layers, right? Don't take any books. Books are memory. Don't take any recordings. Recordings are memory. Be with nature. Forget who your name also, because the last thing before we die, the very last thing, that now death is the next moment, is you won't remember your own name. You know, like I'll remember that. Supposing I see Gorji after 5 years, I'll say, I can't remember his name. I know him, but I can't remember his name. Similarly, when you say that for your own self, I can't remember my name. Next moment, dead. That's death staring you in the face. Right? And that's the moment when you're waiting for that moment. And if you worked in those small gaps where there is no memory, I'm looking for his name. Who is this Gorji? I know him, I've seen his face, but I'm in that gap where there's no memory, and we can't remain in that gap. We feel so, what you call, disturbed in that gap. We want to jump out of that gap, and we have to learn, just wait there. I don't know memory. And in that experience, that gap of no memory. And it is possible. You do meet someone after a few years and you can't remember his name and you're looking for him. Just pause over there. Go into that gap. Is a very precious gap. Very, very precious gap. And slowly over a time, we will build this up where we'll have moments in the day where there's no memory. And you'll be a different person. You'll be a different person. That's just one glimpse of to live in a world with no memory. And then we'll realize that memory is nothing but an electric current which runs in the brain. It has been programmed to run backwards only. And we can program it to move forwards also. That is a different story altogether, right? And so here the Rishi is saying that Om Bhu Bhuva Swaha Savita Ka Dev Varva Yogya hai. I can't say this in English. It's difficult, right? But the Dev of Savita is worth choosing. We meditate upon his Bharga. His Bharga is freedom from memory. And when we meditate upon his Bharga, in that moment of freedom from memory, that divine is in front of you. You know, see, there is a bathroom. And you're not allowed to wear your clothes in the bathroom. You have to take out everything outside. Similarly, in that bathroom, you can't take a tape recorder. You can't take a tape recorder. And these tape recorders are three. In what do you call, in the language of yoga, we call them as Man, Buddhi, Ahankar. Three tape recorders, which work inside. They're called Antakara, inner current. But to go in that bathroom, you have to leave them outside. So when you go in the bathroom, right, you have to leave these outside. You experience something in the bathroom, but you have no inner instrument in which to record it because no memory is allowed inside. And then you have to come out and you have to share with people what you have experienced inside. And there you then train your memory, but you train that memory to come to the doorstep of the bathroom. You train these inner instruments to come to the doorstep of the bathroom. They're not allowed inside, but as soon as you come out, there is some exchange. And you can't talk about what exactly happened in the bathroom, but you can talk about it in some way. And that is why it's very difficult to convey that moment when there is no memory, but still we can say, because there's no memory to record it, how to tell anyone about it. But there we can still say that there is a moment where we can be free from memory, and it is our birthright to work towards that moment. It is hard work, and we must work towards that moment. And that is the final essence of the Gayatri Mantra, to reach that stage where I drop all the baggage that I'm carrying. And in that moment, there is nothing left inside. So I'll stop over here. I hope I've been able to explain the mantra in a proper way. If there's still some time, so we can take questions today, actually.
Anybody wanting to ask a question, please go ahead.
Anybody wants to ask? Anybody can ask.
Sir, I am putting Swati ji. She has raised her hand.
Please. You can
Yes,
remove
Swati.
me. Hema, you can
Yes.
remove me.
1 minute, Gorji, it's not working. It's not,
Huh?
your sound is not coming. 1 minute. Please, now. Sorry,
Namaste, Rajan bhai. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I had a question, like you talk about impressions, right? So I have a question, like when you listen to some awakened person or you read them, is there anything with those impressions, like you feel some sensation, something like raising up, in the sense like, are those impressions already charged with the, like something by the awakened person? Like even years later, if I listen to some audio recordings of some awakened person, you feel something which is different than the normal impressions.
Yes. So people who are at a higher level of consciousness, and when they speak and when they write, they allow it to happen. They are not consciously planning anything. It is coming from some higher source. Actually, you can say it is coming from Mahakal. And there, with each word, their presence they put inside, their prana they put inside. So when you hear those words, you feel the prana and you sense their presence, right? So in those words cannot die even after 1,000 years. So if we read the Yoga Sutra today, I mean, Patanjali may have gone maybe a couple of 1,000 years ago, but the words are as alive because each word has been filled with his prana, and in each word his presence. He was conscious when writing. Consciousness means that you're holding presence. So in each word, his presence is felt, and his presence is not separate from my presence. It is the same presence. I'll tell you one small story. One day I had gone to Mr. Tavaria, and he told me that you keep a photo of Ramakrishna in front of you in such a way that when you're lying on your bed, you'll open your eyes in the night and you'll be able to see the eyes of Ramakrishna. And that is that photo of Ramakrishna cross-legged, where his eyes are turned inwards. They're only opened a little, but he's not looking outside. He's looking at his own inner self. And his inner self is not separate from my inner self. So I told him that that means the photo will be at my feet, and usually we don't keep such photos at the feet. So then he just gave me a half slap like this, and he says, "Hey, forget all that. You put the photo over there." So I put the photo there, and I used to get up in the night many times, because I was practicing with my dreams and all at that time. And I look, and suddenly you feel yourself moving in through his eyes. That photo is not a photo; it is a technique. Can you understand what I'm trying to say? That photo is not a photo, it is a technique where you move, because he's left his eyes a little open, but he's not looking at you. He's looking at his own divine, right? And his divine is your divine. And the minute you move in, you get a glimpse through that photo. Similarly, when you read the words, their words, then there is that presence inside. He's looking at that inside when he's writing those words. Can you get what I'm trying to say? Or whenever he's given that lecture, he's looking at that inside. And that is the beauty, that the Guru's words, they can never become stale. It's not possible, because the presence is always fresh inside. He's looking at his inner divine fragment, his inner Atma, when he's writing those words. And that gives the same words a different quality. So if and it's very obvious, Mr. Tavaria teaching the refining exercises. I may teach in the same way he teaches. I may use exactly the same words which he, used. But it can never be the same, because when he's teaching, he's looking at his inner divine, right? I'm taking steps towards my inner divine. Can you see? You understand what I'm trying to say? So that is a totally different thing. I may even teach more knowledgeable than him, but that doesn't make a difference. That is that. Can you get what I'm trying to say? So when they are writing, that divine presence is there, which touches the words in a way. And when we read those words, we don't just read the words, we touch that. We touch that.
Rajan bhai, can I add something to what you just
Please
said?
do, please do,
Yeah?
sir. Please do.
Uh, Actually, this is a very interesting experience in the sense that, in the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, one of the sutras says, Vitarag Vishayam Vachittam. So one of the interpretations is that you want to become a Vitaragi, or you want to rise up in your consciousness. So connect with those who have become the Vitaragi, who have risen above and connected with the divine. And the moment you see, reading looking at the picture of the great beings, or reading their writings, or listening to their voices, it's a means of connecting with them. And it automatically brings a kind of a change in our consciousness, and we are lifted up.
Yes.
And Swati, I can see that she has this tremendous capacity to connect. That is why, Swati, you should be very happy about yourself, that when you read something or you hear something, you feel that you are being charged with energy. So this is a great experience. Just carry on. And that is your way. We all have our own methods of charging ourselves. So this is your method. So go ahead. It's great and very auspicious. I think Suchismita has asked a question, Rajan bhai. She says, what is Gayatri Chand and how should it be properly chanted? Kindly guide.
It's a very difficult question. I am not very well versed in this chands. It is a 8-meter chand, and I have tried very deeply to understand the chands, but it's very difficult, very, very difficult.
I think then one day when Vivek Bhau is here with us, I think today he is not there, so we can request him to chant.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll do that.
What I can say is that there is a story of the chandas, how the chands were born. There is a story behind it. And I don't remember the full story, but there were two, I think Garud's mother and what was Garud's mother's name? I forgot. And her sister's name was Kadru. She was the, what do you call, of the Nags. And they were playing a game, some very similar to the Kabaddi game which we play. And it is out of one person going there and one person coming here that suddenly the whole science of Chandas was born through that game. And it's something very deep. I have not really been able to crack the mystery of the Chand. So I'll stop over there. But I can tell you the way I say the Gayatri Mantra. One of the ways is, of course, where Mr. Tavaria taught me with the 3-step rhythmic breathing. And he has written a whole Gayatri Mantra, what do you call, meditation, which takes 6 months. So if you want, we can take that one day. That is in his own handwriting. I can just show you how I do it is, Swaha Tat Savitu Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yonaha Prachodaya. That is how I say it, but I have developed this on my own in a certain way. But I also say it with the 3-step rhythmic breathing. And if you want me to take a talk on Mr. Tavaria's experiment, his whole Gayatri meditation, then I can take that one talk with you. He's left definite moves on that Gayatri Mantra.
Any other question, please? Anybody? No questions. Right?
Just one question. Could I ask?
Yes, Shashi. Let me pin you.
ये जो गायत्री मंत्र है, इसमें आप बताते हैं कि पहले आपने ये इसको बाउंड्री बाइंड कर दी है, भू भुव स्वः, और फिर तत्सवितुर वरेण्यम से आप बाकी उनके जो देव हैं उनके ऊपर जाते हैं। पर ये ऋषिकेश में एक आश्रम है जहां वो प्राणायाम मंत्र करते हैं, जिसमें वो ऐसे करते हैं, ओम भू, ओम भुव, ओम स्वः, ओम मह, ओम जना, ओम तप, ओम सत्यम, ओम तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यम भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो न प्रचोदयात्, तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यम भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि तन्नो सवितुर्वरेण्यम भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि तन्नो, बाकी वो जैसे कि ना रुद्र प्रचोदयात्, देवी प्रचोदयात्, ऐसे करके आपो ज्योति रसोमृतम ब्रह्म भूर्भुवः स्वरोम नमैति। तो इसमें doesn't it come back in a full circle in the manner in which you have explained?
Many people have different, what you call, ways of saying the mantra, but the basic mantra is just this much only: Tat Savitu Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimai Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. Everything else has been added, but this was the basic mantra which came out of Vishwamitra's mouth, right? And then his disciples added this much to make it a little more powerful and to give it a complete science in it. So I just talked about two parts of it. That first science is to take our prana from our level to the level of the sun, and then to take the prana from the level of the sun to the source of all prana. At present, source of all prana for all source of life for us is the sun. So for us at our present level, sun is the absolute. But there is a journey beyond the sun also. So I just try to differentiate and talk about both the journeys. I just try to do. Right? I mean, you can say it in so many different ways. Right? But my main emphasis was
sannyasis.
Not just on saying it. What does it mean to live the Gayatri Mantra? And that is why I explained the 3 kinds of food and all that.
Yes. And food restrictions are necessary for saying the Gayatri Mantra. Food and other restrictions, Sanyam jaise is required for saying the Gayatri. There's a lot of emphasis on that in the ashrams.
No.
Like
my teacher used to say that she is the mother and there are no restrictions over there. So don't have any restrictions. Of course, I wouldn't advise you doing it, have a peg in a glass and doing it, but otherwise don't keep any restrictions there. See, I'll tell you one thing. Spirituality is absolute freedom. Wherever there are restrictions, do's and don'ts, then that's, you make a religion and spirituality goes away. So absolute freedom. That is Purna. The sinner is also in that totality. The saint is also in that totality. If you take the sinner out of that totality, it is no longer the totality. Right? And that vastness of consciousness, that vastness of heart in us should be there to accept everything, not denying anything. And that is a spiritual heart in us. The minute we make rules, don't do this, do this, that we are killing spirituality and making a religion out of it. Right? We don't want to make a religion out of it. We want to move on the science of spirituality. And science of spirituality is absolute freedom and absolute acceptance.
And Shashi, there is one thing that, sometimes what happens that the sannyasis create a lot of do's and don'ts. But people in the worldly life,
yes,
they have to be more inclusive. So it is a choice, of course, whether we would like to be sannyasis, because if we become sannyasis, then there will be a lot of conflict that we are going to encounter in our worldly life. So, Soli Bhai asked Rajan Bhai to keep the picture of Ramakrishna. He was a grihast. He was one of the greatest saints of modern India. He was a grihast and very inclusive. So actually, if the heart is awakened, then all these do's and don'ts will disappear. Only the essence will be. I think there was one more question, Rajan Bhai.
Yes, I'm putting her on spotlight. Yes, please go ahead and ask your question. Dhiren Kataria, please.
Okay, sorry, nice, Vinita here.
Vinita.
I'm just, hi, how are you?
Good, good.
Right, when you say you have to be time free of memory, suppose, for example, if I'm going on a walk and if I don't take anything with me and I try and forget that I'm mother or I'm sister, I'm whatever I am. So, but the thoughts keep on coming. You just can't stop thoughts coming into your head, or you can't. So it's continuously switching between thinking, even though you try and take pauses in between and stuff like that. But what is the best practice when you want to really want to get free of it, whether you are into the nature or something like that?
So you cannot do it for the whole walk, but when you go on a walk, you can sit on a bench and try to sense the presence inside and say to yourself that presence is free of all this. And feel that moment, that in that moment, I am no wife, I am no husband, I am nothing, just I am. There is a certain being inside, just to be, not to become. The minute I become a husband, and we have to keep on practicing this. It's not going to come overnight. But over some time, suddenly there'll be a moment where something will drop. And that moment is precious.
I did experience it once in Deva, but I'm just trying to see when you are doing day-to-day life and when you're walking and stuff like that, there's always things keep on coming.
Your voice is not coming clear. I can't get your voice.
Okay.
Do you understand what you're saying? No,
No,
it's not coming clear.
No, we can hear Rajan Bhai.
Yeah.
Okay, no worries. No worries. Yeah, so I understand what you're trying to say. So even one of the practices you mentioned, that when you see the trees or leaves or farm, or you try and be and feel their sensation.
You have science. You have science. So supposing you're looking at a field and corn is growing in the field or wheat is growing in the field. So you feel the wind, right? Now try to become the corn and feel the wind. Try to become the corn and feel the sun. Then slowly identify so much with the corn that you can feel it pulling up juices from the soil. That's sensitivity. So your sensitivity becomes the sensitivity of the corn, of the wheat. Right? And in that moment, you drop everything what you are and you become this. This is a, what you call meditation towards a small samadhi. Right? But it can happen. And especially when you go into nature. In nature, there is no sanskar in nature. Can you get it? If I come to your home and I see a beautiful TV, there will be a sanskar. I have a bad TV, she has a good TV. But if there's a beautiful rose flower in your garden, I won't say, I have a bad rose flower, she has a good rose. In nature, this jealousy is not going to come up. Can you get what I'm trying to say? And that is why it's very important, at least in a year, to spend some time in nature where all this drops. And it changes you completely. Because at some time we have to work with memory and be free of memory, because that is the ultimate freedom.
Rajan Bhai, you also said that you should really look at yourself a number of times during the day and find out what kind of thoughts you are entertaining. So this was a kind of task which was given to me by Mr. Tavaria once.
Right.
He said 20-25 times a day.
Right.
You just say, tell yourself, stop. And the next moment, you see what was there. What was the thought that you were entertaining the previous moment? And what I found was that most of the thoughts were either coming from memory or they were there because of my prejudgment. I think Rajan Bhai has disappeared.
No, the camera fell down.
Okay, okay. so they were there because of my prejudgment. And in just a couple of months, there was a remarkable change in me. I was working in a kind of a department there where there would be a lot of petty rivalry or jealousy between colleagues and all those things. And I somehow just got over it, because I was able to see that most of this jealousy or rivalry which was there in my heart, it came from prejudgment. I had not really known those people actually, and I was just judging them on the basis of what I thought of them. And it disappeared. And my relationships at the workplace became really transformed completely. This is a great thing. And it is perhaps, this is what you said about the Gayatri Mantra, that it is a complete code of life.
Right.
Recognizing effulgence in everything that we have, every relationship we have, the food we have, the thoughts we have, the breath we are taking. And focusing on that effulgence makes us draw the prana that is there. And that raises the consciousness. And that becomes the doorway to liberation. It has been an absolutely amazing talk, Rajan. It contains a complete code of life. It is not just a set of words whose meaning one has to understand. It is about just living it from moment to moment. So,
Sir, there is one more question from Nazia. She has written, as I understand, we are trying to
let us try to pin her. Where is Nazia?
Nazia?
Sir, here.
Okay. Yes. I am just putting you on spotlight. Yes, Nazia.
Yes, thank you, Rajan sir, Gaur sir, for this, what I can say, opening. But see, I've been going through this process of introspection, of understanding memory, and through various maybe readings or things are coming to me to understand. So now I've been able to understand that we have to be free from memory, from identification, from the sanskaras or swabhav, whatever we have come. So then now next question it comes in my mind is, then what could be the purpose of creating the memory? Like why is memory there in the first place?
Are you married?
Yes.
Huh?
Yes.
You're married, no?
Yes, yes.
She has a son. She has a son.
If you have no memory, how would you recognize your husband?
So it will be to just live in this boo world. So in this world.
Yeah, and you see, man has to make that effort to be free from something. No? And the final step is the freedom from memory. Freedom from memory. And everything creates memory. Every moment there is memory. Even just now, if I'm thinking of something, even my muscles are going tense and relaxed, and they are also recording every moment. So there is a muscular memory. There is my nervous system has a memory. My blood has a memory. Every layer has its own memory inside. And so memory is a very big bubble. I mean, when we die, we have a whole time body full of memory. So memory is something which we work with, but memory is also useful to relate in the world. Right? Everything is based on memory. I study because of memory. I get a degree because of memory. No? So in the world, to make the world, memory is the main ingredient. But to be free of the world, I have to be free of memory.
I have a question, Rajan Bhai. This Captain Shukla here.
Yeah.
Now, are we saying that we need to have small breaks in the memory?
We start with very small.
And remain at small or not so big? Because otherwise, I tell you the question which is coming to my mind straight away. People who have Alzheimer are totally free from memory. They don't recognize anybody. They are not left with any memory.
No.
And how do you relate this thought process with the example of a Alzheimer patient?
No, I will just go to this in a different way. They have not lost memory. They have lost the function of that part of the brain which can, what do you call, recapitulate memory. The memory is lying there. Memory can never die. Some physical organ in the brain which can access the memory is no longer working. I don't know, am I coming across in this?
Yeah, you
memory does not die. I'll tell you, many years ago, my guru was Swami Ramdula Reba. I spent 7 years with him. And he, on one of the trips, he took us to Belur Ghat. That is where the Ramakrishna mission is. And at that time, Vivekananda's last disciple was living. And his name was Vireshwaranand. And Vireshwaranand was in a coma, and they would put him on a chair over there. And what do you call? And people would come and have his darshan. Now, I was with my guru, and my guru, he did Dandvat Pranam to Vireshwaranand. And it's going on. I'm here. I'm an intelligent guy. I'm saying this guy is a vegetable, right? He's in a coma. And how can my guru do Dandvat Pranam to him? Anyway, that incident passed, and many years later, Ramdula Bapu left the body in 1982. I met Mr. Tavaria in 1988. Mr. Tavaria started teaching me dream yoga, how to enter into dreams, how to work consciously with the dreams. And suddenly I realized in one of those states that all your physical organs could be cut off. I could have no memory. If I opened my eyes, I could have no memory. But still inside, I can be in a state where I have access to all memory with my subtle organs. And this science cannot record. There is no way science at its present state of whatever evolution can come to that, but it may be in the future. What I'm trying to say, then I realized that Swamiji, he was still conscious there. Consciousness had nothing to do with being in coma or not being in coma. Being in coma was a physical part of the body, right? And consciousness is in spite of the body. That is what, right? That is what I'm trying to tell you. So a person can be in this thing, what do you call Alzheimer's. That does not mean that he cannot hold his own presence. He cannot know his own presence. So there is consciousness still.
Sir, there is one more thing, that being free of memory will not mean forgetting everything.
It does not mean forgetting.
Memory, maybe it is there, but it is right now of no use. When it is needed, it will be accessed.
You're not a slave.
One's life need not be determined by memory. Like right now, what is happening is that our lives are being determined by memory. Our responses are being determined by memory. So the whole idea is to rise above those responses and go to a state of consciousness where that memory does not affect our response.
I'll mull over it in greater
It is like you climb a hill and memory is a little low.
Sorry?
You climb a hill and memory is a little low.
Right.
If you want to make use of memory, you have to come down 2 turns.
Right. Getting it.
आपने निशब्द कर दिया. There is nothing to speak, I tell you, Rajan bhai. I can't speak anything. There is no question of asking anything. Great. It was a great lecture today. I mean, are you hearing?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
एक ही शब्द है उसके लिए. निशब्द. निशब्द. I have no words. I have no words.
Speechless. So, shall we call it a day, Rajan bhai?
Yes, sir.
We have already.
Do you want to meet next week again?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we'll keep next week death and how to work with the death.
Yeah, right. That will be great. So now there is no time for meditation. I think the lecture was meditation itself. So we'll just end with the Shanti mantras. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sah Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. सद्गुरुनाथ महाराज की जय।